The courtroom was already full that morning. The sound of soft whispers filled the air, a mix of curiosity and tension. Everyone had come to see one person, Tiffany Halstead, the spoiled socialite who thought the world revolved around her. The double doors opened and all eyes turned. Tiffany walked in, late of course, dressed in designer clothes that probably cost more than most people's rent. A pair of oversized sunglasses covered half her face. Her heels clicked against the marble floor like she was stepping onto a runway, not into a courtroom. She didn't look nervous. In fact, she looked bored. Her lawyer hurried behind her, face pale, whispering for her to behave, but Tiffany just waved him off like he was some annoying assistant. The people sitting in the rows turned to stare, a mix of disbelief and judgment spreading through the crowd. She took her seat with a loud sigh, dropped her expensive handbag on the table, and looked around the room as if everything about it disgusted her. The dull walls, the wooden benches, the ordinary people. She even smirked when a bailiff told her to remove her sunglasses. Slowly, with exaggerated flair, she took them off, flashing a look that screamed, "I don't care." Then the courtroom door opened again. The mood shifted instantly. Judge William Grant entered, tall, composed, and calm, with a quiet authority that demanded respect. The chatter died. The bailiff called out, "All rise." Everyone stood, except Tiffany, who hesitated, rolling her eyes before slowly getting up, as if it were the biggest inconvenience in her life. The judge took his seat, adjusted his glasses, and opened the file before him. "You may be seated," he said, his tone steady and firm. Tiffany dropped back into her chair with a loud thud. Crossing her legs and folding her arms like a sulking teenager, Judge Grant began, "Miss Halstead, you are here today regarding multiple parking violations, reckless driving, and," before he could finish, Tiffany tilted her head and muttered under her breath, "Seriously? This is so stupid." A few people in the gallery turned their heads. Her lawyer froze. But the judge didn't react. He simply turned a page, his calm expression never changing. "Miss Halstead," he continued, "you were cited for endangering a pedestrian 2 weeks ago. Do you—" Tiffany leaned back, cutting him off with a lazy wave of her hand. "Oh, please," she said loudly enough for half the courtroom to hear. "I didn't even hit the guy. He was fine." "This is ridiculous," gasps rippled through the room. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. Even the court reporter stopped typing for a split second. Judge Grant closed the folder slowly. He looked at her over the top of his glasses. Not angry, just disappointed. "Miss Halstead," he said quietly, "in this courtroom, we follow rules of respect." "I suggest you adjust your tone," Tiffany smirked. "Sure thing, Your Honor," she said, dripping sarcasm into every word. Her lawyer put his face in his hands. The bailiff's jaw tightened. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Judge Grant didn't flinch. He simply looked at her, calm, unreadable, steady. His silence spoke louder than any shouting could. Then softly he said, "Very well, let's proceed." As he began reading through the details again, Tiffany rolled her eyes so hard it was almost theatrical. She started tapping her manicured nails on the wooden table. Tap, tap, tap. Louder and louder, like she was daring someone to call her out. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently, "Please, Tiffany, stop." But she ignored him, staring straight ahead with that same smug smile. The spectators exchanged glances. Some shook their heads. A few leaned forward, sensing this wasn't going to end well. Judge Grant finished reading, then asked evenly, "Miss Halstead, do you understand the charges brought against you today?" Tiffany barely looked up. "Yeah, sure, whatever," she muttered. The silence that followed was heavy, thick enough to feel. Judge Grant placed his pen down, folding his hands on the bench. For a moment he didn't speak. He just studied her, his sharp eyes calm but unyielding. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but carried across the room like a steady drumbeat. "Miss Halstead," he said, "you may believe this is a joke, but I assure you, by the time we're done here, you'll understand exactly why you're in this courtroom." Tiffany laughed quietly, shaking her head, still not taking it seriously. But everyone else could feel it. Something in the judge's voice. A quiet power that said this wasn't going to end the way she thought. The murmurs in the room faded into complete silence. Even the air felt heavy. Tiffany shifted in her seat, still pretending not to care. She didn't know it yet, but this would be the moment everything in her life started to change. And as Judge Grant picked up his gavel and began the hearing, the entire courtroom leaned forward, waiting to see how justice would answer arrogance. The courtroom stayed quiet, almost too quiet. You could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner and the soft scratching of the court reporter's pen. Judge Grant sat tall, calm as ever, flipping through Tiffany's case file. He read out the charges again. Multiple parking violations, reckless driving, and an incident involving endangerment of a pedestrian. Tiffany sighed loudly, leaning back in her chair. She crossed her legs, her bracelets clinking as she twirled a strand of her blonde hair. She looked around like the whole thing bored her to death. When the judge mentioned endangerment of a pedestrian, she rolled her eyes. "Endangerment," she muttered. "I barely hit the gas." A few people turned toward her. Her lawyer, sweating already, leaned in. "Tiffany, please," he whispered, voice trembling. "Don't talk like that." But Tiffany didn't listen. She never did. She whispered under her breath, just loud enough for a few people in the front row to hear. "This is a waste of my time." Judge Grant looked up. He heard it, everyone did, but his expression stayed unreadable. He calmly adjusted his glasses and said, "Miss Halstead, do you find this process amusing?" Tiffany gave a lazy shrug. "Honestly, kind of. I mean, come on. Parking tickets and a scared old man? This is ridiculous." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The bailiff shifted his stance, jaw tightening. The lawyer covered his mouth, trying to disappear into his chair. Even the court reporter hesitated, glancing up from her keyboard for a moment. Judge Grant, still calm, leaned forward slightly. "Miss Halstead," he said evenly, "this courtroom is not a comedy stage. You will conduct yourself with respect." "Respect?" Tiffany laughed under her breath. "For what? For sitting here over a few stupid tickets?" Her tone was sharp, dripping with arrogance. The judge paused, staring at her for a long moment. Then softly he said, "Let me remind you, young lady, this is not just about tickets. Your actions put someone's life in danger." Tiffany scoffed. "Oh, please. I didn't even hit anyone." People love to exaggerate. That was it. The line that shifted the air completely. The spectators felt it first. That subtle, invisible turn when irritation turns into disbelief. A woman in the back whispered, "She's really saying that?" Judge Grant sat back, folding his hands. "I see," he said quietly. "So you believe this case is exaggerated?" Tiffany smirked. "Exactly. Do you remember the incident that brought you here?" Tiffany flicked her hand dismissively. "Some guy stepped into the street. I honked. He moved. End of story." The judge nodded slowly. "End of story?" He reached for a document in front of him and flipped through the pages. "According to this report," he said, reading clearly, "the pedestrian in question was a 67-year-old retired teacher named Edward Lopez. He was crossing the street legally when you accelerated toward him. He fell and injured his wrist." Tiffany's smirk wavered just a little. "He fell," she said, defensive. "I didn't touch him." "You scared him," the judge replied firmly. "Enough to make him stumble, enough to make him hurt himself." "So? That's not my fault he can't move fast enough." Tiffany shot back, her voice rising slightly. This time the room truly froze. Even the air seemed heavier. People turned toward her in shock. Her lawyer buried his face in his hands. Judge Grant placed the paper down slowly, looking at her, not with anger, but with a deep, unsettling calm. "Miss Halstead," he said softly, "Mr. Lopez is in this courtroom today." Her eyes flickered for the first time. The judge turned toward the second row. "Mr. Lopez, would you please stand?" From the bench, an elderly man rose. He wore a simple gray jacket. His left arm was wrapped in a sling. He looked tired but calm. There was no anger on his face, just quiet disappointment. He nodded politely toward the judge, then looked briefly at Tiffany. Their eyes met. For a second, Tiffany's expression faltered, just slightly, before she looked away. Judge Grant spoke again. "This man could have pressed charges, Miss Halstead. He could have demanded far harsher penalties. But he didn't. Do you know what he said?" Tiffany didn't respond. "He said," the judge continued, "I just hope she learned something before she hurt someone else." A silence hung over the courtroom, thick and heavy. Tiffany shifted in her seat. For the first time, her usual confidence began to crack. The judge's tone softened. not out of sympathy but gravity. "When you mock this process," he said, "you don't just disrespect me or this court. You disrespect every person who believes justice is meant to protect them. People like Mr. Lopez." Tiffany bit her lip. She wanted to roll her eyes again to laugh it off, but she couldn't. The weight in the room was too strong. Still, pride wouldn't let her back down completely. "I said I didn't hit him," she muttered. "People are being dramatic." The judge took off his glasses slowly and set them on the bench. "I see," he said again, in that low, steady voice that carried more authority than shouting ever could. "Then perhaps, Miss Halstead, the problem isn't what you did. It's what you don't understand," she frowned, confused. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," he said, leaning forward, "that accountability has nothing to do with how rich you are or what you wear. It's about empathy, something you seem to have misplaced." The room went dead silent. For a moment, Tiffany didn't speak. She just stared, her lips pressed tight. Her lawyer sat still, barely breathing. Judge Grant then turned back to the case file and said, "Let us proceed with sentencing." The air in the room felt electric. Everyone could sense that this wasn't going to be an ordinary punishment. Tiffany crossed her arms, whispering to herself, "Whatever. He can't do anything to me," but the truth was, she was wrong, very wrong, because Judge Grant wasn't done teaching her what justice really meant. And by the time this hearing was over, Tiffany Halstead, the untouchable socialite, would realize that no amount of privilege could protect her from a lesson she desperately needed to learn. The silence in the courtroom felt endless. Judge Grant still hadn't moved. He just sat there, hands folded, watching Tiffany like he was waiting for something that hadn't quite shown itself yet. Tiffany shifted in her chair, fidgeting with the diamond ring on her finger. She hated silence. It made her uncomfortable, made her feel small. And small was something she never allowed herself to be. Finally, the judge spoke. "Miss Halstead," he said quietly, "you seem to believe this hearing is beneath you." Tiffany gave a half smile. "Well, it kind of is, isn't it? I mean, come on, I'm not a criminal. I didn't rob a bank or anything." That small smirk she wore, the one that had always gotten her out of trouble, didn't work this time. Judge Grant didn't even blink. "Criminal?" he repeated softly. "You know what defines one? It isn't always theft or violence. Sometimes it's arrogance. Sometimes it's the inability to see how your choices hurt other people." Tiffany laughed under her breath, pretending she didn't care, but something in her chest tightened. "You're really going to compare parking tickets to that?" The judge leaned back in his chair. "This isn't about tickets. It's about responsibility." Her lawyer touched her arm, whispering, "Please, Tiffany, stop talking." She ignored him. "I think this is overkill," she said loudly. "He's fine. You said it yourself. He's right there." All eyes turned toward Mr. Lopez again. The older man stayed silent, sitting still, his arm in that worn-out sling. There was no anger in his eyes, only disappointment, a kind that said more than words ever could. For the first time, Tiffany couldn't hold his gaze. She looked away, pretending to fix her hair. Judge Grant's voice cut through the silence again, steady as ever. "Do you know what Mr. Lopez did for a living before he retired?" Tiffany sighed. "No, and I don't really care. He was a teacher," the judge continued. "He spent 40 years shaping young minds, teaching them values, respect, empathy, discipline. Things you seem to believe no longer matter." She felt her stomach twist, but she hid it with another eye roll. "Can we just finish this already?" The judge looked at her, calm, but there was a new sharpness in his eyes. "Finish? No, Miss Halstead. We haven't even begun." The way he said it sent a shiver through the room. He reached for a file beside him, flipping to the last page. "You see," he said, "this isn't the first time you've been in my courtroom." That caught Tiffany off guard. "What?" "2 years ago," he said, "a similar case came through my docket. Reckless driving, late appearances, attitude not unlike what I'm seeing now." She frowned, her confidence cracking. "I don't remember that." "Convenient," he said softly. "You were issued a warning that time. No charges, no penalties. You walked out of this courtroom smirking the same way you walked in today." Her eyes widened. "You were that judge?" He nodded once. "Yes, and it seems the lesson didn't last," the audience murmured. A woman whispered to her friend, "Oh, this is going to get serious." Tiffany's lawyer ran a hand down his face. Your Honor, perhaps we could. The judge raised a hand, silencing him instantly. Mr. Andrews, your client will speak for herself. I think she's been quite eager to do so. Tiffany sat frozen. She didn't have a witty line ready this time. Judge Grant continued, his tone quiet but cutting. When someone believes rules don't apply to them, that's not confidence, that's privilege. And privilege without conscience is dangerous. He let the words hang in the air. Even the court reporter stopped typing for a moment, lost in the weight of it. Then he looked directly at Tiffany. Tell me something, Miss Halstead. When you pressed the gas that day, what were you thinking? She hesitated. I was late. I didn't mean— No, he interrupted gently. You weren't thinking. Because when you believe you can buy your way out of every mistake, you stop thinking about the people those mistakes hurt. She didn't answer. For once, she had no comeback. Judge Grant leaned forward. Do you know why Mr. Lopez didn't demand jail time? Tiffany shook her head slowly. Because he still believes people can change, even the ones who hurt him. Those words hit harder than she wanted them to. She looked down, staring at her manicured hands, now trembling slightly. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Judge Grant took a slow breath. Miss Halstead, this court believes in justice, not humiliation. So instead of sentencing you in the usual way, I'm going to do something different. Tiffany looked up, her brow furrowed. Different how? He didn't answer right away. He simply reached for a new set of papers from the stack beside him. You seem to think accountability is optional, he said. So we're going to change that. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering anxiously, Please, Tiffany, don't say anything more. But curiosity got the better of her. You can't do anything extreme, right? I mean, this is just a traffic thing. Judge Grant didn't even blink. What I can do, Miss Halstead, is remind you that empathy is part of the law. She frowned. Empathy? What does that have to do with this? He set the papers down, his gaze steady. Everything. The spectators shifted in their seats. A woman in the back whispered, He's about to teach her something. Tiffany's heartbeat quickened. For the first time, her confidence slipped into unease. Judge Grant said calmly, You will receive your penalty today. But more importantly, you will receive perspective. Consider this, an opportunity rather than a punishment. She blinked, confused. An opportunity? You'll understand soon enough. His tone was calm, but there was power in it. The kind of quiet power that could break through even the thickest arrogance. He looked down at the papers again, signing something with deliberate care. Then he looked back up, his voice firm but measured. Miss Halstead, he said, I am issuing a sentence designed to make you confront the very thing you've ignored all your life. Humility. Her lips parted slightly. What does that mean? He simply replied, It means the next 30 days are going to teach you what no amount of money ever could. The words hit her like cold water. People in the gallery leaned forward, whispering, What's he going to do? Tiffany swallowed hard. You can't be serious, she said, her voice shaking for the first time. Judge Grant leaned forward, his tone low but final. Oh, I am. And with that, he lifted the pen again and began writing the words that would change Tiffany Halstead's life forever, a sentence not built from punishment, but from purpose. As he wrote, Tiffany sat frozen, her heart pounding against her ribs. She didn't know it yet, but her world, her perfect, polished, privileged world we thought was about to shatter. And everyone watching knew one thing for sure. This was no ordinary case anymore. This was justice redefined. The scratching sound of the judge's pen was the only noise in the courtroom. Each stroke across the paper seemed to echo louder and louder in Tiffany's ears. She sat frozen, eyes darting between her lawyer and the bench, her confidence slipping away like sand through her fingers. Finally, Judge Grant set the pen down. The silence stretched for a long, uneasy moment. Then he looked up, his calm gaze landing squarely on Tiffany. Miss Halstead, he said, his tone measured but firm. I have considered the facts of your case, your prior conduct, and your complete lack of remorse. Tiffany shifted in her seat, muttering, Oh, come on, the judge continued, ignoring her. It's clear that traditional punishment, fines, warnings, even public embarrassment, has done little to change your behavior. Therefore, I believe a different kind of sentence is required. Her lawyer leaned forward. Your Honor, with all due respect, the judge raised his hand. Sit down, Mr. Andrews, you'll want to hear this. A soft murmur ran through the courtroom. Everyone leaned in, sensing something unusual was coming. Tiffany crossed her arms, her jaw tight. What now? Community service? A lecture? Let's just get this over with. Judge Grant's eyes met hers. You will, in fact, perform community service, he said. But not just anywhere. You will spend the next 30 days volunteering at the downtown women's shelter. Tiffany blinked, confused. Excuse me? You heard me correctly, he said evenly. 30 days. Every morning at 8 a.m. you will report to the shelter. You will serve meals, assist with cleaning, and help with their daily operations. Her mouth fell open. You can't be serious. I'm not working with— Finish that sentence carefully, Miss Halstead, the judge warned, his voice like steel wrapped in calm. She swallowed, glancing around as cameras flashed from the back row. A few journalists were already scribbling notes, their eyes lighting up with headlines. Her lawyer whispered urgently, Tiffany, stop talking. But she couldn't help herself. This is insane. You want me to, what? Hang out with homeless people? That's not my problem. The courtroom gasped. Judge Grant didn't flinch. He simply removed his glasses, placed them on the bench, and looked at her. Really looked at her. His eyes were sharp, but his tone remained calm. Miss Halstead, he said quietly. That sentence right there, that's not my problem, is exactly why you're here today. You see, entitlement doesn't just blind people to others' struggles. It convinces them that empathy is optional. Tiffany's face flushed red. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. This isn't about humiliation, the judge went on. It's about awareness. You will work among women who have lost homes, jobs, families. Many of them have faced challenges you cannot imagine. You will serve them, not as charity, but as an equal human being. This is ridiculous, Tiffany snapped, standing suddenly. You can't force me to do this. The bailiff took a step forward, but Judge Grant raised his hand again. Sit down, Miss Halstead, he said, his voice firm but calm. This court absolutely can and will enforce this sentence. Failure to comply will result in a far harsher outcome, one that may include jail time. Her lawyer tugged at her sleeve, whispering frantically, Please just sit down. Tiffany's hands trembled. For once she didn't know what to say. Slowly she sank back into her chair. The judge put his glasses back on, then continued reading the rest of her sentence. You will also attend 6 sessions of empathy and behavioral counseling, he said. A full report will be sent to this court at the end of your 30 days. Any attempt to avoid or falsify service hours will result in immediate arrest. The words hit her like bricks. The arrogance that usually guarded her like armor began to crumble. You can't do this, she whispered. Judge Grant looked directly at her. Miss Halstead, I can, and I just did. The courtroom buzzed again, people whispering in disbelief. Some were smiling quietly, others simply nodded in approval. The judge wasn't finished. Before we adjourn, he said, I want you to understand something very clearly. Justice is not about revenge. It's about restoration. This is your chance to restore something you've lost. Your sense of humanity. Tiffany's lips parted, but no sound came out. Then Judge Grant added softly, And, Miss Halstead, I sincerely hope you take this opportunity seriously, because the world outside your bubble won't always protect you. The gavel came down with a firm crack. Court is adjourned. The sound echoed through the room like thunder. Tiffany sat there, frozen. Around her, the gallery came alive with chatter. Reporters whispered headlines under their breath. Socialite sentenced to homeless shelter service. Cameras flashed as she stood, stunned and furious. Her lawyer leaned in, speaking quietly. We can appeal, but I suggest you don't. This could look worse if we fight it. She didn't respond. Her face was pale, her hands clenched tight around her designer bag. As the courtroom emptied, Mr. Lopez rose from his seat. He walked slowly toward the exit, his sling tucked close to his chest. When he passed by Tiffany, he paused. For a brief second, their eyes met. He didn't speak, didn't glare, didn't smile, just looked at her with that same quiet disappointment. Then he nodded once and walked away. That silent gesture hit harder than any scolding could have. Tiffany's throat tightened, but she quickly looked away. Outside the courthouse, chaos waited. Cameras surrounded her like bees. Tiffany, how do you feel about your sentence? One reporter shouted. Do you think the judge was fair? She shoved past them, face hidden behind her sunglasses. No comment, she snapped, voice shaking slightly. Her lawyer hurried her into a waiting black car. As the door slammed shut, the noise of the crowd faded away. Inside, Tiffany sat back, staring out the tinted window. The city blurred past, busy streets, flashing lights, people walking with purpose. For the first time, she realized something she had never truly noticed before. Those people out there, the ones she always looked down on, they were living lives she knew nothing about. The thought made her chest tighten in a way she couldn't explain. She turned away from the window, trying to shake the feeling off. "It's just a month," she muttered under her breath. "I'll get through it. Then everyone will forget." But deep down, something inside her whispered that this wasn't just another temporary inconvenience. This was the beginning of something different, something she couldn't control or buy her way out of. And for the first time in her life, Tiffany Halstead felt uncertain about herself, uncertain about her world, and completely unprepared for the lessons that waited beyond the courtroom walls, because what she didn't know yet was that the hardest part of her sentence wasn't cleaning floors or serving food. It was finally coming face to face with a world she had ignored all her life, and that world was about to teach her what just as truly meant. The morning air was colder than Tiffany expected. The sun had barely risen, and the sky was still painted in soft gray. She stood outside the downtown women's shelter, clutching her coffee cup like it was armor. Her car idled behind her, a sleek black luxury sedan that didn't belong on this street. For a long moment, she didn't move. She just stared at the building in front of her, small, a little run down with peeling paint and a flickering sign that read, "Welcome home." The words made her chest tighten. She wasn't sure why. 30 days, she muttered to herself. That's it. Just 30 days. Her driver stepped out, ready to open the door for her, but Tiffany waved him off. She wanted to get this over with. The smell of the city, coffee, exhaust, and something faintly sour, hit her as soon as she stepped out. It wasn't her world. It wasn't clean or polished or filtered through tinted glass. Inside the shelter, the noise was immediate. The clatter of dishes, quiet voices, laughter mixed with exhaustion. It was a world moving at its own rhythm, and Tiffany felt instantly out of place. A woman in her 40s with tired eyes but a kind face approached her. "You must be Tiffany," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm Maria, the supervisor here." Tiffany forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm supposed to volunteer or whatever." Maria didn't flinch at her tone. "Good, come on. Let's get you started." They walked through a hallway that smelled faintly of disinfectant and fresh bread. Women sat at tables with children, chatting quietly. A few turned to look at Tiffany, her designer jacket, her gold earrings, her posture that screamed, "I don't belong here." Maria led her into the kitchen. "We serve breakfast first. You can help with that." Tiffany blinked. Actually serve food?" Maria smiled. "That's what volunteering means, sweetheart." The sarcasm wasn't lost on Tiffany, but Maria's voice wasn't cruel, just honest. The next hour dragged. Tiffany stood behind a counter, awkwardly scooping scrambled eggs and toast onto paper plates. Her manicured nails struggled to hold the ladle properly. Every time someone said thank you, she nodded stiffly, avoiding eye contact. Her shoes, white designer sneakers, already had a splash of something on them. She didn't know what, and she didn't want to find out. Halfway through the morning, her hands started to ache. She leaned against the counter, glancing at the clock for what felt like the 10th time. Only 2 hours had passed. Maria walked by, catching the look on Tiffany's face. "Long morning?" she asked with a grin. Tiffany sighed. "This is ridiculous. I could pay someone to do this job." Maria's smile faded. "Maybe you could," she said quietly. "But the point is that you're doing it yourself." That simple line stuck with Tiffany longer than she expected. As the morning rush ended, she took off her gloves and sat in the corner, exhausted. Across the room, a group of women were folding donated clothes. One of them, a middle-aged woman with short hair and tired eyes, caught Tiffany's glance and smiled. "You're new here," the woman said. "Unfortunately," Tiffany muttered. The woman chuckled softly. "Don't worry. First day's always the hardest." Tiffany looked up. "You work here?" The woman shook her head. "No, I stay here. Been here 6 months?" Tiffany froze, unsure what to say. The woman's tone stayed light, but her eyes carried a quiet weight. "Used to have a house. 2 kids, a husband. Then life happened. It's funny how quickly everything can disappear. Tiffany didn't respond. She just stared, unsure if she should apologize or change the subject. The woman smiled again, this time softer. Don't worry, honey. You don't have to say anything. Just remember, not everyone here started poor. Some of us just fell. Maria called from the kitchen and the woman went back to work, leaving Tiffany staring into space. For the first time, her usual walls felt thin, like cracks forming in glass. That night, Tiffany drove home in silence. Her luxury car glided through the city streets, past people walking home from late shifts, street vendors closing up, kids laughing on sidewalks. She rolled up her window and stared straight ahead, trying to ignore the strange heaviness sitting in her chest. When she reached her apartment, a high-rise with marble floors and perfect lighting, everything felt colder than usual. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was hollow. She poured herself a drink, but the sound of the shelter, the laughter, the soft chatter, the smell of breakfast, played in her mind. 30 days. She whispered again, but it didn't sound convincing anymore. The next morning came faster than she expected, and somehow this time she didn't dread it quite as much. She arrived at the shelter early, surprising Maria. You're early, Maria said, smiling. I couldn't sleep, Tiffany muttered. Maria handed her a new task, helping sort through donations. Bags of clothes, shoes, and old toys covered the tables. Tiffany hesitated, then rolled up her sleeves and got to work. An old coat fell out of one of the bags. It was faded but clean. A tag inside read Halstead Foundation. Her eyes widened. It was one of her family's old charity drives. The irony stung. Her name was sewn into generosity she had never actually practiced. By lunchtime, her hands were sore, but for the first time, she didn't care. She sat down beside the same woman from yesterday. Her name was Denise. They shared sandwiches and quiet conversation. Denise told her about losing her job, then her home, and finally, her husband who couldn't handle it. Tiffany listened, really listened. And the more she heard, the smaller she felt. Later, as they cleaned tables together, Denise said softly, You know, sometimes life teaches us by stripping away what we thought mattered. Tiffany nodded slowly. Yeah, she whispered. I think I'm starting to understand that. When the day ended, Maria stopped her at the door. Good work today, she said. See you tomorrow? Tiffany hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, tomorrow. Outside, the air felt different. The world didn't look as cold as it used to. She stood for a moment on the sidewalk, watching people pass, faces tired but determined, strangers helping each other with small things. For the first time, she didn't feel above them, she just felt human, and though she didn't know it yet, that simple feeling, that tiny flicker of empathy, and was the beginning of a change that would rewrite everything she thought. She knew about herself. The mornings at the shelter soon became a rhythm Tiffany hadn't expected to enjoy. The first few days were awkward. She'd fumble with trays, complain about the smell, and secretly count the minutes until she could leave. But somewhere around the end of the first week, something inside her began to shift. It wasn't dramatic, no sudden epiphany, no music swelling in the background. It started small, the way she noticed Maria smiling even when she was tired, the way Denise laughed with the other women while folding clothes as if life hadn't crushed her spirit, the way strangers said thank you, like they actually meant it. Those small things clung to Tiffany's thoughts long after she left the shelter each day. By the second week, she stopped checking her watch every 10 minutes. She stopped hiding behind her sunglasses and designer jackets. Her hair was tied up now, her hands covered in flour or soap more often than jewelry. One morning she arrived early, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Maria was already there, setting up breakfast. Morning, Tiffany said quietly. Maria looked up, pleasantly surprised. Well, look who's turning into a morning person. Tiffany smiled almost shyly. Don't get used to it, but Maria saw through her sarcasm. You're doing well, she said. You've stopped running from the work. Tiffany shrugged. I guess it's not so bad. They began working side by side, flipping pancakes on an old griddle. For a while, the only sound was the sizzling batter and the faint hum of the city outside. Maria spoke again. You know, when you first walked in here, I thought you wouldn't last a day. Tiffany laughed. Honestly, I thought the same. Maria smiled. But here you are. It wasn't a compliment set out of obligation. It was genuine. Tiffany felt it, and it warmed something inside her that had been cold for a long time. That afternoon, she found herself sitting with Denise again during lunch. Denise had become her unexpected anchor in this new world, someone who never treated her like a project or a charity case. She treated Tiffany like a person. Denise poured 2 cups of weak coffee and handed one to her. "You look different today," she said. Tiffany raised an eyebrow. "Different how? Less guarded," Denise said. "Like you're finally breathing." Tiffany smiled softly. "Maybe I am." They sat in comfortable silence for a while before Denise spoke again. "You ever think about why the judge sent you here?" Tiffany looked down at her cup. "Every day." "And?" She sighed. "I think he wanted me to see something I didn't know I was missing." Denise smiled knowingly. "Humility?" "Yeah," Tiffany said quietly. "That." The next few days went by faster than she expected. Tiffany started doing things without being asked. Sweeping the floors, helping carry boxes, reading stories to the kids who came in with their mothers. She even laughed. Not the fake, performative laugh she used at parties, but the real kind. The kind that sneaks up on you when your guard is down. One afternoon, as she helped a young girl pick out a jacket from the donation pile, the little girl smiled and said, "You smell nice." Tiffany laughed. "Thank you. That's probably the soap." The girl nodded seriously. "My mom says nice people smell nice." That simple line hit Tiffany harder than she expected. For the rest of the day, she couldn't stop thinking about it. That evening, as she drove home, her phone buzzed. It was a message from one of her old friends. A photo of them at a rooftop party, drinks in hand, laughter frozen in time. The caption read, "Where have you been hiding, Tiff?" For a moment, she almost replied. But as she looked at the image, the polished smiles, the empty eyes, the fake laughter, she realized she didn't miss it. Not really. She turned off her phone and stared out at the city lights. There was a quietness she had never appreciated before. The next morning, Maria handed her a clipboard. "We're short-staffed in the kitchen today. Think you can handle breakfast on your own?" Tiffany blinked. "Me alone?" Maria grinned. "I wouldn't ask if I didn't think you could. It wasn't a challenge, and it was trust." And that meant something now. Tiffany got to work. She moved through the kitchen with focus, calling out orders to volunteers, handing out plates with a smile. By the time Maria returned, the line was shorter, and people were leaving with warm food and warmer hearts. "You did it," Maria said, patting her on the shoulder. Tiffany exhaled, laughing. "Barely." "No," Maria said softly. "You did more than that. You showed up." Later that day, Tiffany was cleaning the dining area when she heard Denise's voice from behind her. "You've changed, you know." Tiffany turned. "Everyone keeps saying that." "That's because it's true," Denise said. "You used to walk around like the world owed you something. Now you're finally seeing what you owe it." Tiffany didn't know what to say, so she just nodded. That night when she got home, she didn't rush to her bedroom or scroll through social media. She sat by the window, looking out at the city lights flickering below. She thought about Judge Grant, his calm, unshakable voice, the disappointment in his eyes that day in court. She realized now it wasn't anger he felt. It was hope. Hope that she'd finally learn what he couldn't teach with words alone. She whispered into the quiet, "Thank you." The following week, Tiffany began staying longer at the shelter, helping close up, talking with the women, sharing stories. One evening, Denise brought her an old photo. It was of her family, before everything fell apart. "I keep it to remind myself that broken doesn't mean finished," Denise said. Tiffany stared at the photo, then at Denise. "You're stronger than anyone I've ever met." Denise smiled faintly. "So are you, kid. You just didn't know it yet." That night, Tiffany drove home under the soft glow of streetlights. For the first time, she felt proud, not because of her name or money, but because of who she was slowly becoming. When she looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror, she hardly recognized the woman staring back. There was no arrogance, no entitlement, just someone trying, learning, changing. Her sentence was nearly over, but the lessons had just begun. For the first time in her life, Tiffany didn't want to escape responsibility. She wanted to honor it. And though she didn't know what awaited her in the courtroom once her 30 days ended, one thing was certain. She was no longer the spoiled girl who mocked a judge. She was someone new, someone real, someone finally awake 30 days. It was just 30 days in, but to Tiffany it had felt like a lifetime. The woman who had once strutted into a courtroom with arrogance now stood in front of a mirror, straightening a plain beige blouse she'd borrowed from the shelter's lost and found box weeks ago. The designer wardrobe still existed somewhere in her penthouse closet, but this morning it didn't feel right to wear any of it. Today wasn't about showing off. It was about showing up. She took a deep breath and looked at her reflection. Her hair was tied back simply, her face bare, her eyes softer. For the first time in years, she didn't see vanity staring back. She saw honesty, and maybe just a little peace. When she arrived at the courthouse, the place looked exactly the same as before. Tall ceilings, cold marble floors, echoes of footsteps bouncing off the walls. But something inside her had changed completely. Her lawyer met her at the entrance, flipping through papers nervously. "Tiffany, you sure you're ready?" She nodded. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I'm ready." They walked down the long hallway together. Every step felt heavier, not from fear, but from meaning. The same reporters were waiting outside the courtroom, cameras flashing, microphones extended. "Tiffany, how was your experience at the shelter?" One shouted. "Do you think the judge was fair?" asked another. She paused for a moment, meeting their gaze. Then she smiled faintly. "He was fairer than I deserved." The room fell quiet for a beat, the same kind of silence that follows truth. When Tiffany entered the courtroom, Judge William Grant was already seated, glasses perched on his nose, reading through her case file. The same man, the same calm. Yet this time she didn't see authority to defy. She saw someone who had believed in her enough to hold her accountable. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Everyone stood. Tiffany stood a little taller. "You may be seated," the judge said. The sound of chairs echoed across the room as Tiffany took her seat at the front. Her lawyer whispered, "Just answer politely. Be honest." She nodded again. Judge Grant cleared his throat, glancing at the papers before him. "Miss Halstead, it's been 30 days since your sentencing. I've received reports from the downtown women's shelter as well as your counselor." He paused, looking up. "Would you like to speak before I read them?" Tiffany hesitated. Her heart raced.
"Yes, Your Honor," she said softly. "Go ahead." She stood slowly, smoothing her shirt.
Her voice shook at first. "When I came here a month ago, I thought this was all a joke," she began. "I thought I was untouchable. I thought money and attitude could get me through anything." The courtroom was silent. Even the air seemed to still. "I was wrong," she continued, her voice steadier now. "At first, I hated every second at that shelter. The noise, the work, the people. I thought I was better than them. But then, I started to listen, to watch, to understand." She paused, her throat tightening. "I met people who've lost everything and still smile. I met women who fight every single day just to stand back up, and they never once complained the way I did about anything. They showed me what strength really looks like." Judge Grant listened quietly, his face unreadable, but his eyes softened slightly. Tiffany went on, her voice trembling with emotion. "I learned that privilege isn't power. It's blindness if you don't use it to help others. And empathy. Empathy isn't weakness. It's what keeps us human." A faint murmur rippled through the gallery, a mix of surprise and quiet admiration. Tiffany took a shaky breath. "I know an apology can't erase what I did, but I'm truly sorry. To you, to Mr. Lopez, and to everyone I disrespected that day." Her lawyer looked stunned. He hadn't expected this. Neither had anyone else. When Tiffany sat down, the judge took a long moment before speaking. He flipped through her progress report. "The shelter supervisor writes that you showed exceptional dedication, arriving early, staying late, and helping beyond your assigned duties." He looked up. "Is that true?" Tiffany nodded. "I just did what felt right." Judge Grant leaned back slightly. "Your counselor also notes significant improvement in self-awareness and empathy. She believes this experience has had a transformative effect." He let the words linger, his gaze steady on Tiffany. "Miss Halstead," he said finally, "do you understand now what this courtroom stands for?" Tiffany met his eyes. "Yes, Your Honor, it stands for justice, but also for second chances." The faintest smile touched his lips. "That's correct." He picked up his pen again. Given your progress and completion of your sentence, the court finds you in full compliance. Your case is officially closed. A quiet sigh of relief escaped Tiffany's lips. But Judge Grant wasn't finished. He leaned forward slightly. However, he said, before we end, I have one final request. Not as your judge, but as someone who believes in what you've become. Tiffany straightened. Yes, Your Honor. Use what you've learned, he said simply. Share it. Help someone else find what you've found. That's how real change lasts. Her eyes stung. I will, she whispered. Judge Grant nodded once. Then we're done here. He gave a small but genuine smile, the kind that said I'm proud of you even if he didn't say it out loud. The gavel came down one final time. Court adjourned. Tiffany sat there for a moment frozen, the weight she'd been carrying for weeks, maybe for years, and finally lifted. As the courtroom emptied, Mr. Lopez slowly approached her. His arm was better now, but he still moved carefully. Mr. Lopez, Tiffany said, standing quickly. I don't know what to say. He smiled kindly. You just did, he said. You learned. She swallowed hard. I'm so sorry. He nodded. I know. And I forgive you. Those 4 words nearly broke her. Tears welled up, but she blinked them away, smiling through them instead. Mr. Lopez placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Make it count, Miss Halstead, he said softly. Then he walked away, leaving her standing there in the quiet aftermath of redemption. Outside, the sunlight hit her face. Reporters shouted again, asking for comments, reactions, statements. But Tiffany didn't stop for cameras this time. She just smiled and said, no comment. And for the first time, she meant it. Not out of pride, but peace. As she stepped into her car, she looked out at the people walking down the street. The workers, the mothers, the students, the tired but determined faces that made up the city she'd ignored for so long. She saw them differently now, not as background, not as strangers, but as reflections of herself. That evening, she didn't drive home to her penthouse right away. Instead, she took a detour. The car pulled up in front of the downtown women's shelter. The lights were still on. Inside, Maria and Denise were finishing up dinner service. When Tiffany walked in, they both froze, then broke into warm smiles. You came back, Maria said. Tiffany nodded, her voice catching. I wanted to say thank you. For everything, Denise chuckled. You don't need to thank us, sweetheart. You did the work, Tiffany smiled softly. I think I'll keep doing it. If you'll let me. Maria grinned. There's always room for one more pair of hands. That night, Tiffany stayed behind the counter again, serving meals. Not as punishment, but as choice. She looked around the room, at the laughter, the chatter, the simple beauty of people surviving together. And for the first time, she felt exactly where she was supposed to be. Later, as she stood outside looking at the flickering welcome home sign, she realized something profound. Justice had changed her life, but kindness had changed her heart. The camera of life zoomed out on Tiffany Halstead, not the spoiled girl the world once knew, but a woman reborn through humility, empathy,
and grace. And as the night sky shimmered over Los Angeles, she whispered to herself,
almost like a prayer. Real strength isn't in being untouchable. It's in being able to change. And with that, Tiffany turned and walked back inside, ready to begin, not as a headline, not as a scandal, but as someone new, someone real, someone redeemed.